Díomh Cordia. Hello, everybody. Good evening to you, or good morning, or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat, brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. I see Ciao Elvira from Italy, and Harriet, and somebody from Southern Maryland, Julia from, horribly grey London, Washington. It's kind of grey here too, I suppose. Ava from Belgium, Pat from Ulster, lovely to see you, and Sherry from New York, Jules from Wyoming, very welcome, and Steph from Dartford in Kent. So you're all very, very welcome. And Stefan, welcome, and Salve, and Luna Fireoak, that's a great name, East Yorkshire, lovely to see you, and Poppy, lovely to see you from Stratford and Avon, and Sue from Northamptonshire, Daniele from Italy, ciao, and Gordon from Aberdeenshire. And Sydney, Australia, listen, well done for getting up so early. I'm very, very impressed. And Linda, Jane from Ayrshire, and Mark, Wiltshire. So lovely. You're all so welcome. And let me introduce you to my guest this evening, and I'm going to Germany. So let me welcome Egbert Danninger. So Egbert, you are so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Thank you, Eimear. Lovely to be here.
Great. So I don't know Germany. I've been there recently, but I don't know much about Germany or the geography of Germany. So just tell our viewers where in Germany you are and what's it like.
Well, perhaps first to start with that I'm not a real German. I'm from the Netherlands actually, and I moved to Germany a couple of years ago. And I moved to the southern part of Germany, to a Bundesland. That's how they call it here. That's called Bavaria, Bayern. And I'm living, let's say, close to the biggest city nearby. It's 30 kilometers away. It's Nuremberg. And basically 2 hours driving from the Alps and 2 hours driving from the Bavarian forest, and really close to the river Danube, to the Donau, 75 kilometers. A hilly area, really lovely, lots of wood, lots of really nice small streams in the wood, wells that, well, you can also drink from. So really, let's say an area where a druid feels at home.
Oh, lovely. And how does it compare with the landscape you lived in when you were in the Netherlands?
Yeah, the Netherlands is actually completely different. The Netherlands is really flat, you know. I think we have 2 mountains, although people in Germany don't think those are mountains. Small hills. And where I lived in the center of the Netherlands actually. I was born there, raised there, lived there for 20 years. And then I moved around quite a lot in the Netherlands. I lived a long time in the northern parts of the Netherlands, in a province called Groningen. Really nice, by the way. I loved it over there. You have a really wonderful city, Groningen City. One of my favorite cities in the Netherlands. But the landscape is completely different. And of course, as you know, it's kind of crowded over there. So there's people everywhere. And that's a big difference with here in Germany, because if you walk here in the woods, you hardly meet people.
Wow.
And if you meet people, it's usually fun because you can share some stories. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. It's really interesting that, that going from a crowded place, because I mean, this was the Netherlands is so small.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's smaller than Ireland, isn't it?
Actually, I have no clue, but we have in the Netherlands approximately 17 million people living there. I think I once saw a graphic, and that they actually showed that the Netherlands is comparable to a big city, but has really nice parks. So it's a big country. It's a small country or a big city, whatever you think. Yeah.
I mean,
and I must tell you that since I moved to Germany, I started naming the Netherlands a bit differently. I'm not calling it Netherlands anymore, but Nether City.
The Nether what?
Nether City. Yeah, but still, I work there, of course. I spend some time over there regularly, and I also love it over there because it has also, let's say, well, it's a less formal atmosphere than here in Germany. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to imagine a small little place with 17 million people. We have the whole island less than 7, and it takes you 2.5 hours to go from Dublin to Galway, from left to right, maybe 3
Okay.
hours left
Oh,
from
yeah,
east to west, and
yeah.
maybe 10 hours north to south. But that's how
Well, then
small.
it's the Netherlands is something like 400 kilometers, I think, from north to south, and something like 300 kilometers from east to west.
Okay, so it's much smaller than
Yeah.
Ireland. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I actually did not realize that, but yeah.
Okay, so what was it that brought you to Druidry?
Yeah, I more or less expected that question, of course. What brought me to Druidry? I actually, I had always the feeling, I always felt like a druid, actually. I was always attracted to everything that had to do with magic, with Merlin, with wizards, already as a young child. When I was young, there was a really popular TV series, and it's comparable to Ivanhoe. I think you know that. It was in the
Yes, I
past
agree.
a UK series about a knight, and we also had that series in the Netherlands. Different name actually, forgot the name, but there was a story about a knight and his sidekick, and the sidekick was a wizard, and
Okay.
with all my friends, everyone wanted to be the knight, and I was the only one who wanted to be the wizard. So it's already for a long time, let's say, in my system. I was always interested in all those things. And of course, I tried to find and read almost everything what I could find about that stuff. I did not find so much about Druidry at that time, I must say. But at a certain moment, I heard of a nice castle in Cornwall called Tintagel.
Yeah.
So I decided to go there because there are all the King Arthur stories around it. I went there with some friends. A lovely trip, marvelous environment, by the way. Tintagel, a lovely city. If you have not been there, go there. You have, of course, King Arthur's castle in Tintagel, but you also have a really great fudge shop in the city. I can recommend that. Really great.
A what shop?
A fudge. These toffees.
Oh, the fudge shop. Okay, okay.
The fudge shop. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I went to Tintagel, and there's a part, let's say, from the cliffs where you can look at the castle actually, and you probably know that below the castle there's a cave.
Yes.
That cave is called Merlin's cave. And when the tide is high, you can't enter the cave. But when I was there, the tide was low, and of course I had to enter Merlin's cave. I was alone actually; nobody else was there. To my surprise. Took some pictures. There's not so much to see actually in the cave itself. Gathered some stones, and when I looked at the pictures again, I saw lots of orbs on the picture. Really a lot. So I was a bit surprised about that. After a while, my friends also joined me in the cave. Made also some pictures, but on their pictures, no orbs at all. So that was also really interesting. On the way back to Tintagel, you actually pass a small bookshop. It's called King Arthur's Bookshop. So I thought I have to go there, I have to have a look. And at that time, I was already doing quite a lot with tarot.
Okay.
And in this bookshop, there was one tarot deck that I haven't seen before. It was the Druid's Tarot, actually. It was only one copy.
Philip and Stephanie's.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh.
And there's a nice booklet with it. I started looking into the booklet, and then I saw this website, druidry.org. So I thought, wow, let's have a look over there. And it turns out there's a whole community of people like me. So a week later, I was member of the order. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and that was already in 2007. So quite some time ago. Yeah.
And what? So were you a solitary, like a solitary druid for a long time, or how long did it take before you met people in the Netherlands to connect with as a
Well, I
druid?
did it. Oh, I did it as soon as possible. Actually, there was in my area where I lived at that time. There was a grove,
Okay.
and I actually visited the grove. That grove as soon as I could do that. Also, I think 2008, beginning of 2008, and then I started to connect to people, did work on the grassroots, well, things like that. So I actually became quite quickly already more or less active in meetings, in celebrations, rituals, going to camp, stuff like that. Yeah.
And now you organize camps yourself.
And now I organize camps myself, not alone, because it's a hell of a job, I can tell you.
Yes.
Uh, Bettina, my wife, is also working on that. Uh, and well, I think we have a group of volunteers of something like 10 to 15 people. And that's also what you need in order to do a camp, because as I told you, it's a lot of organizing. But the good news is we're going to organize a camp in 2022 in July. And to our surprise, actually, it's already completely fully booked
Ooh.
after one day. So the first day it was online. We have 90 places available, and all 90 places were booked.
Wow.
So the community is actually longing to meet each other again. And we found a great venue. Also not easy, by the way, to find a nice venue for 90 people,
Mm-hmm.
because there are lots of things you have to supply in that. It has to be a nice place, of course. People have to be able to sleep indoors and outdoors if they want to. Should be allowed to make a big fire, because druids like fire.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. But we managed to find that place. It's in the Eifel, in Germany, reasonably close to the Netherlands and Belgium too.
Oh, great.
So it's also kind of easy to travel to for, let's say, most people in at least these three countries. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. So when you're quite a long time now in the order. Would you say when you think of your Druidry, is would you say Druidry is something you are or something you do? What's your view on that?
Well, I think more or less both, but I think
Huh?
it helps a lot. I think the most OBODs that I know actually are druids, are OBODs. And the doing part, yeah, I'm not sure what that is actually. Of course, we do rituals. We try to at least I try to live my life like a druid, and I think I'm doing that kind of nicely nowadays. Of course, I had to make a big transformation, from the first time when I was in Druidry, and now, let's say, what is it, 30, 40 years later, my life is actually completely different than when I started in Druidry.
Could you expand on
Uh,
that? In
yeah,
what way has it changed?
well, let's say when I started, I was still in business. Yeah, in let's say formal business.
Okay.
That means I did work for big companies in the Netherlands. Had my own company. Few, no, already at that time, I think. Um, yeah, and so it's a completely different atmosphere. It's actually the daily business stuff that I think most people experience in their lives. Um, and actually, I had to get used to, let's say, showing the Druidry things that I actually started to connect to. Um, Now, at that time, it was for me not so natural to tell people that I'm a Druid,
Hmm.
for instance. So I had, of course, at this time with my business also an own website. And in different steps, I actually started to tell more about, let's say, the other things I'm also doing, the Druidry stuff. Funny enough, it was really, people liked that. People actually appreciate it somehow, and for some kind of reason made me more interesting for people. Because I was able to connect two different worlds, the business world, and I'm still partly in that business world, and well, you could also say the spiritual world, and that's also still a large part of the things I do these days. But it was really, let's say, it took me a few years to actually show, not showing, but um, to share more about Druidry in my business life. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not so common. And in the Netherlands it's a lot easier than in Germany, because in Germany Druidry has also some, let's say, less pleasant connotations, because the Druid title is also used for sometimes in the far right corner of
Okay.
yeah, well, the same what you have actually in the United States.
So how do you navigate that, in Germany, that association with the far right? As Germany.
Well, yeah, of course, I'm not really in the German organization of OBOD in that sense, but what I know for sure is that there's something on the website that actually claiming that they have nothing to do with that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I think at this moment you can't do more than that about these things.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of time, I think, because also in Germany, OBOD is growing, so more and more people become a member. So more and more people get to know about it. Really nice. Last year or 2 years ago already, there was a nice documentary made on, let's say, spiritual movements in Germany. And also OBOD was mentioned over there. It was made by Bild Zeitung. They also have a TV part. And that was really a nice way of showing, let's say, that there are also Druids in Germany. So I think in general, the attitude is changing step by step, small steps. Yeah,
I suppose Druidry's time has come.
definitely. And I think it's also a place where people long for, when they find Druidry. It was just as with me, finding that there are more people that have the same opinion about stuff, think the same way, act the same way, have a deeper connection with nature. It's really great to find out there's a tribe actually. Yeah. And I did in the past. I did work with an Indian chief, Phil Lane. I did do quite some things with him on dialogue and stuff. And I was always a little bit jealous on him. I was envying him because he had this tribe, and it's so great to find out that Druids also have a tribe. And actually, it's also our Celtic origin, our Celtic roots. And I'm really so lucky that where I live at this time, it's really Celtic area. A little bit more than 200 meters away from our house, we have a Celtic grave hill. And there are lots of, let's say, old traces of Celtic settlements in this area. And it's really interesting to see that also, let's say, in Germany, scientists are actually not only digging up more stuff, but also showing more stuff about the Celts. There's a Bundesland here in Germany that's called Hessen, and they actually make an advertisement with it that Hessen is Celtic. And they have a really nice museum over there. They did dig up really nice stuff.
Uh-huh.
I visited actually not so long ago that museum. One of the things they found over there was a statue of what they think was a druid king. And he's kind of famous because of the hat he's wearing. Now it's a Mickey Mouse hat. I'm not sure whether you ever saw that picture. And they try to explain why this Mickey Mouse hat, because it's a hat with actually two big ears if you look at for the first time. But it turns out it's the leaves of the mistletoe. At least that's their explanation. Yeah. So the ears are also not symmetric. They simply two different leaves of the mistletoe. And the nice thing is, they found lots of stuff, but there's also lots to, let's say, explore, because for many things there are no explanations yet. In the area where I live, some years ago, they did some digging, and they actually retrieved a golden hat.
Oh.
Yeah, really a big one actually. It's still in a museum in Nuremberg. They think it was used for rituals also in Celtic times. But still no explanation why someone would wear a golden hat that's more than 1 meter long, I think, and weighs 4 or 5 kilos. Yeah. So still things to be discovered. But if you look into it, at least in this part of Germany, you find so many things related to the Celts. It's really amazing. Yeah, and not only here in this part of Germany, also in Austria, of course, because this was in those days an area that was really connected. Yeah.
Fascinating. Absolutely. I'm sure the person who wore that 5 kilo hat had very strong shoulders.
Probably. Yeah. Or did only wear it once. That was also a possibility.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
You mentioned, your business has changed since you became a druid. How have you integrated? Because I know you feel you're comfortable being open about the fact in your business life that you are a druid. Is there anything? Have you integrated your druidry into you? You do training as well. You're a consultant, am I right?
Yeah.
So, how have you managed to integrate? Well, not completely druidry, but your druidic practice or values or worldviews into your work as a consultant?
Well, basically, if people connect to me, they also connect to my website, and then they actually read my, let's say, biography, and explaining that I'm a druid, explaining how I see the world, what I think is important. So already at that time they get kind of a clear picture. Yeah, and I must say, to my surprise, many people are actually. Now, I did also in my business life, I talked to lots of people, let's say, high up in organizations. And what I always found really interesting that when I spoke to them one-to-one, they were always interested in spirituality. But I also found out that when I asked them, okay, you're really into this, it's for you important, you do things on the spiritual level, but what do you do in your business? Do you use it in your management team, your daily life? And they always said, I would not be able to do that because it would actually not, it would be harmful to my career. And that always puzzled me a bit. So I thought, in order to change that, we should be more open about it, to share it, to see and show that it's normal, that is also a part of your life. So I thought, then I also have to start doing that myself. And of course, there's always a risk that you lose customers because they can't relate to you. But what we also found out is that you can practice Druidry even without naming it Druidry. You can actually label it a bit differently, and then it gets a complete different view from people. In all my workshops, I do meditations, But when I do a workshop, let's say the more business-minded people,
Mm-hmm.
I don't call it a meditation, but I call it a relaxation exercise. But it's basically the same. And what I always notice is that once they're used to it, then they start saying, "Oh, I'm actually practicing this also at home." So yeah, that's how I integrate it actually. And yeah, that's about it.
Wonderful. It's it's um, um, it's I suppose it's important to be able to not to have to compartmentalize your life. That, but not
Yeah.
everybody is safe enough to do that. Here in Ireland, I mean, I've been very open about being a druid, and I taught in a seminary for
Hmm.
26 years. People knew I'm a priestess, a druid, priested, uh, religious people, and I find here in Ireland, luckily, people are curious because I think, well, Druidry never left, or
Hmm.
that nature-based spirituality never left, even with Catholicism and the stronghold Catholicism had in to 20 years ago in Ireland. It's
Hmm. Yeah.
gone now. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, Catholicism is still there, but the power of the church over Irish people is not. But that people have always been and still are very, very curious. And I suppose because we're not dogmatic as druids, that it's still anyone can hold their own values and be a druid. It's not about having to abandon your past or your past
Exactly.
worldview or reject the values of your culture in order to be a druid. It's that you can integrate them, which is wonderful to be able to do that.
Yeah. I must say that it's easier to, let's say, to practice Druidry in the Netherlands than in Germany in that sense. That there's a big difference. Also because of, let's say, the influence of Catholicism. That's really strong here in Bavaria. And the Netherlands, of course, religion in general has much less influence these days. Yeah. But sometimes people start also confusing things because in let's say an organization where I once worked, a person came to me and he said, "Oh, so you are the shaman here?" And she had heard that I was doing some stuff. But it's really funny that they also translate it automatically into, let's say, their own world, in their own understandings of the things you then apparently do. Yeah,
And that's okay.
and that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. And of course, in my workshops, I also teach, let's say, stuff that you could see as spiritual, and I think it's definitely like that. But I always manage to give it, let's say, the right source so that people can actually use it in a practical way in their own lives. Because, I found out that it's absolutely no use of trying to convince people of something. People have to learn by themselves and see what fits for them. And that's basically what OBOD also is. You get lots of material and stuff, but you always have to see, does it work for me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the
And I
beauty
think
of it.
that's really important, and that's also the fun of it, and there are so many different, let's say, views on Druidry.
Mhm.
Although we share as OBOD community, we share, let's say, a common ground, and that makes also it easier to connect with each other because you talk about the same stuff. But basically, everybody can actually use it and fill it in as he or she likes it. And that's also what I like a lot, You have
Mhm.
lots of freedom and you have a common framework.
Absolutely. So when you think of Druidry, your 14 years, as a Druid and in the order, um, how has or when has Druidry supported you that you would say, this has really stood to me or helped
Well,
me in this time?
yeah. Well, it sounds a bit dramatic, but I would say it was the thing that was missing in my life.
Okay.
So I was really happy to actually discover this organization and all these wonderful people, because that's really what we have. I always like to meet nobodies on small meetings or big meetings. Always nice stories to share, fun. So that's great. And I actually can say that it changed my life completely. Yeah, definitely. So let's say before 2007, something like that, I was still, let's say, really a businessman, worked for large corporations, and now I'm more a practicing druid, doing magic stuff, teaching and talking about magic. Um, yeah, and then actually my life also, and even the way where I live completely changed. Yeah.
In what way has that changed the way you live?
Um, now I really find the place where we live a magical place. We
Okay,
live really remote, close to the forest, no neighbors, uh, sustainable built house, lots of herbs and plants and trees around us.
wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I'm not the only one that actually manifested that. My partner also, and more probably. Um, and of course, I also met my partner in OBOD, so that also makes a big difference.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah, makes life even a lot easier, I would say. Because you can share things so easily, create things together. Really fun. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Gabriella has a question. So she's asking for a friend. So out of 14 years, how many were in the Bardic grade?
Yeah, I'm really bad in years and stuff like that. So I always divide things in less than 10 years ago and longer than 10 years ago. But let me say, I spent quite on some Gwesu, I spent quite a lot of time. I remember one Gwesu that took me at least 9 months to work it through. That brought some really nice insights. But I would say, um, well, the OVA grade took the longest time, I think. That's
Yeah.
for sure. So I have really no idea. I think 4 years in the Bardic grade, so 6 years in the OVA grade, and 2 years in the Druid grade. Druid grade was more or less easy.
Yeah, I spent 7 in the Bardic grade. So,
All right.
so
Yeah.
Joan says, Gabriella, she's responded, I'm still at Bardic, 10 years in. Pretty much finished now, to be honest. And the thing about this, Gabriella, it doesn't matter how long you are in any grade. It's that your path takes its own time. There's
Exactly.
no rush and there's no comparison. That each one of us is on our own. And this is the beauty of the order, is that you go on your own journey and your own path. And although there are 3 grades, there's no hierarchy within those 3 grades, but there is a
Yeah.
pathway: Bard, Ovate, and Druid. And some people choose never to go beyond the Bardic grade, or some not beyond the Ovate. And then you have Dave the Bard, who finished all 3 and says, I am a Bard. And he is called Dave the Bard, so that it's Mark says bardism is a skill which you can always use and always improve upon. Absolutely. So, I mean, many of my guests have said that they've
Mhm.
gone over all 3 grades a few times, and you can keep at it and you discover something new each time.
Exactly. Yeah. And I really loved all the years actually I spent in the grades. And not only because working on the Gwesu, but mainly, no, not mainly, also because of the side steps I took. Um, for instance, there is this part uh, that's about finding, let's say, the values you live by.
Yeah.
And I read a lot about that. And I always thought when I read stuff, these are the values of other people. I really need to find my own values. Um, And actually, I went on a vision quest in order to find out my own values. And that was really, let's say, mind altering. The vision quest in itself, the place where I went to, and actually the results that it brought me. And these side steps, yeah, for me, they're sometimes also the cherries on the cake, actually. So if you are in Druidry, take also other workshops, courses, find things out. Yeah, for me that was a large part of the fun actually.
Yeah,
Traveling, meeting people. Yeah,
because it's not a linear journey, you
no,
know.
it's not.
It's labyrinthine. I have a labyrinth in my garden, and you
Mhm.
go in and around and back, and you think you're close to the center, and then as soon as then you realize, no, you're at the edge. Having where did that happen? That I mean, Poppy says she's stuck in Gorse 20. It doesn't matter. It's probably where you need to be right now. And Gordon says spiral sideways for sure. Yeah. So it is that spiraling in and out, and it makes the journey very interesting.
It definitely does. And I think if you do it too quickly, you're not doing it properly. You know, for me, it would be impossible. Theoretically, you could do it in 3 or 4 years, but for me, that would be a waste of time. The fun is really in actually living it because you really have to live it. You have to experience it. That's the fun part, and that will take a lot of time, but it's really a great time because when you had the last verse, um, yeah, you could start all over again.
Hmm.
Um, but um, yeah, actually, I'm still missing the part after the Druid trade. That's also yeah.
Well, I may have said this many times is that, uh, Michelangelo, when he was 87, said, Ancora imparo, I'm still learning. And I think it's lovely to be able to still have that curiosity, no matter how old you are. Nancy says she's been on the Bardic grade for 40 years. Well done. You
Wow,
don't look,
that's good.
she looks much, by her photograph, she looks much younger than 40. But it's that discovering the magic and continuing to discover the magic, and to be learning all the time, and learning from younger people, older people, from the bees, the leaves, the trees, whatever. That
Yeah,
being open to new experiences, I think it's a wonderful way to be living your life with that sense of curiosity and fascination for the world, and where we
yeah,
are.
exactly. And actually, if I would have to rate the grades, I would say the Bardic grade brings the most because actually the Bardic grade lets you look differently to the world. It enables you to see things on a different level. Because in the Bardic grade you actually start to use your creative powers, your artistic powers actually. Um, and that also activates a different part of your brain. And because it activates a different part of your brain, you see things in a different perspective. And so the Bardic grade is really important in order, before you go to the Ovate and Druid grade. You can't do without it. That's also my opinion.
Absolutely. So when you, I'm just curious about your vision quest. So,
Yeah,
um, and I'm really interested. You said that looking at other people's values, and going, well, they're other people's values. What about mine? Now, I think all of us go through that in some way when we think of the values our parents have given us, or our family, or our culture, and then the importance of questioning those, and then deciding to own them for yourself, or find new values that are more appropriate for you. I'm curious as to what values that you arrived home with after your vision quest.
yeah. I did this vision quest with Bill Plotkin.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah. In Scotland, by the way. Um, we went to a remote place called Loch Nevis.
uh-huh.
Uh, do you know it, by the way?
Where is it?
Well, it's hard to reach. There are two options to get there. You can either go by boat, and then they drop you off somewhere at a small beach, or you could go by taxi, and then at the end of the road you get out of the car, and then you walk for 3 hours with all your luggage. I took the boat. It was
Oh,
much more fun and much easier. But Bill Plotkin, of course, he wrote really nice stuff. He's a wilderness guide, does these things quite a lot. And actually, you get into this process. The place where we stayed was really remote. Water was tapped from the river. Also the water for showering, by the way, so it's kind of cold. And Scotland, it's wet. It's really wet. Everything is wet. And of course the midgets, these are amazing over there. So you have to deal with that. But actually it was a really interesting experience because the whole program is built up to a certain, let's say, summit. But part of the summit actually was that you would find your own quiet spot somewhere, sit on a rock, meditate a bit, and try to get answers on the questions you have. And believe it or not, but I really got an answer, actually an answer that I did hear in my mind. And I got, let's say, 3 answers for my values. And the first one actually was stop judging. Stop judging about yourself and about others. And the second was be grateful for what it is. And the third one was live your life like you want to live it. And for me, that was completely round. For me, it was spot on in that sense. It actually showed me let's say the first 2 are of course really important. And those things bring also something. And the third thing was actually, make your own choices. And if you make your own choices, you're also responsible for your choices. But you can make the choices you would like to make. Yeah. And of course, the first one, stop judging, that helps a lot in order to make choices. And then whatever you get from the universe, it's very important to be grateful for that.
It's interesting, I mean, who of us does not judge? Except if we are judgmental, we're bound, we're tied. And there's something about very, very freeing if we can abandon judgment. I'm not talking about discernment, but judgment of others in a negative way. That can really keep us tied. But the freedom when we can let that go, I think, is magic.
Exactly. Yeah. It frees you from, let's say, your own, mental limitations, if you could call it like that. Like the borders you create for yourself. Yeah.
Poppy says 3 great lessons. I'm keeping these.
You're welcome to use them, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned magic.
Yeah.
So I know you're interested in magic, and the Irish word for druidry and magic is the same. It's druicht. I think your magic is a little bit different. So would you like to just say a little bit about your interest in magic?
Yes. Yeah. Magic is a really interesting subject, of course. Thousands of books are written on the subject. And the thing that I actually kept from my business life was, it's nice to talk about things, but they have to short effect. It should be, things need to be also, let's say, grounded somehow, because magic without any result is no magic to me. So magic always brings results somehow or the other. And already a long time ago, I discovered something that actually made the way I look to magic and other stuff completely differently. And actually, these days, I teach magic to business people, and also to other people, of course. Let's say the more spiritual people, given different names, of course. And recently, I actually found out that the way of magic I do has a name, and that's called chaos magic.
Okay. So just explain what chaos magic is.
Yeah, well, talk to 10 chaos magicians and you have 11 different opinions about it.
It's like Druidry.
And I recently found the book Introduction to Chaos Magic, and the thing that was missing there was actually the introduction to chaos magic. But the core thing about chaos magic is actually that belief is central in it. You know, you really have to believe in things in order to make magic appear or happen. And I devised in the last 15 years my own magical system, and that actually, and it works, I can tell you, because I practice it myself. I teach it to other people. I teach it to businesses, and also there it works. Um, and well, it's a nice and kind of easy system that perhaps a bit hard to explain without graphics. But basically, you know, magic starts with whatever you wish, because you know, magic is for me manifesting your wishes, whatever they are. So finding out what you want to happen, what you wish to happen in the world, what you want to change, that's actually the point where you start. And
so where does the chaos come in?
Yeah, the chaos, chaos magic is a name actually, because well, the claim is actually everything is chaos, and out of this chaos you can manifest stuff. But you could also call chaos differently. What I like about the chaos magic name is that it brings some kind of understanding about what you're doing without actually saying that it's a certain kind of magic. Because you know, chaos magicians, most of them have their own way of performing magic. But what they have, let's say, most of them have in common that working with the belief system is a central point.
Okay.
And if you want magic to happen, you have to do a number of things. You know, I explain a few steps because that would make it more clear to people. Of course, you have to know what you want. You know, your wish has to be clear. That's usually not so easy because most people don't know what they want. Finding out what you want is really a tough thing. But suppose you know what you want, then the next step is actually that you have to use your imagination. And imagination is an art. You know, there's a philosophical, let's say, group of people that describe the art of imagination. It's almost a lost art in that sense. But the bards, of course, you know, are trained to start using their imagination because imagination is a gate. If you actually can see in your imagination what you wish for, then actually you can see a possible future. It's actually a door that opens up and you can see a possible future. That's an important step in magic. You know, you have to be able to see what might be manifested. If you can't see it, it won't happen. And you not only have to see it, but you also have to engage in it with your feelings. You know, you have to see yourself, let's say, manifesting what you wish, but also you have to feel how happy you will be if it's manifested. So the imagination part is really a big thing. And that's all happening in your head and nowhere else. And then the next step is, of course, you have to believe that it can be manifested. You know that, and the combination of imagination and belief is actually the basis for manifesting things as a magician. So you know what you want, you actually can see it happening, you really believe that it's going to happen, and then you have to take the next step. And that's more or less a magical step because you actually are going to share or going to cast a spell or give it a name, that you're going to share what you actually want to be manifested. And that's already, let's say, a part of the creation process because just before that it was only in your head. And when you tell people about it or write it down or create a picture, it already gets manifested in this world. So those are, let's say, the basic steps you take. Am I clear in these things?
I think so. And just one question is, how does that differ? It's, if you compare chaos magic to other kinds of magic, how is it different?
That depends on what kind of methodology you use. Chaos magicians have their own things in order to manifest things. Basically, what they do is actually to do things to feed their belief system. If I do it like this, then it will happen. And if you start believing in it, it's almost like how do you call it when you take a pill that does not work, but actually creates a given effect.
The placebo.
A placebo. You believe that the pill works, therefore it works. So if you believe that it will manifest, things start to happen. And the nice thing is, because if you translate it a bit differently, if you know what you want, if you can actually see it with your inner eye, if you believe it will happen, you do something special, you create focus. And if you create focus, you start to see things that connect to what you want to achieve. Let me give an example.
Go on, yes.
Yeah, so long time ago, I lived in a certain part in the Netherlands, did not like it there anymore. So thought, let's find another place to live. And actually, I did know what I wanted for a house. I could actually see it. I believed I could find it. I actually created a picture of the house where I would like to live. And on a certain occasion, to make a long story short, that I was in an area where I thought, wow, that actually is an area that resembles the picture I have of the house I would like to live. And it had to be a house in the forest. Because, already a druid, I thought I need to live in the forest. On a certain day, I did a bike tour in that area, and I actually passed the edge of a forest, and I suddenly saw a number of mailboxes. Yeah, that's interesting, because if you see mailboxes at the edge of a forest, there must be houses in the forest. Why would you have mailboxes?
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped at the mailboxes, and at the same time, a guy living there came to the mailbox, and we started chatting. And I asked him, is there a house for sale or for rent in this area? And he said, no, people like the place here, so they would not rent it out or sell it. And I had a really nice conversation with him. And at a certain moment, I said, oh, wait, a little bit further along the road, there's one house that's for rent. And that's in the forest. Well, long story short, 3 weeks later, I lived in the forest. But what was now the magical part, because you know what you want. You can see how it looks like. You believe you can manifest it, and that creates focus. I did see the mailboxes only because I was focused on a house in the forest. If I did not have that focus, I would have missed these mailboxes. I would not even have seen them. And by opening up, being curious, talking to people, I simply got that house in the forest. Absolutely. So you create focus. And if you create focus, you start to see the things that will help you to manifest whatever you need to manifest.
That's really interesting, and just there's a number of things I want to say. Mark mentions that that's similar to faith and prayer. Visualize what you want. And I know in my practice as a psychologist, we talk about solution focus. I use solution focused brief therapy as one of the views or theoretical perspectives that inform my practice. And one is around getting somebody to visualize what it is they like to achieve, a preferred future. And sometimes when people can't, it's like, I don't know. I just can't see anything. All right now, I'm in this pain or whatever, this situation. And one thing is we ask a miracle question. We say that if in the night you go home this evening and you do your normal things and then you go to bed and in the night a miracle happens and all your problems are gone away, but you don't know that the miracle has happened. So what would be different?
Yeah.
And they say, well, if I'm depressed now, I can't get out of, well, I'd get out of bed and what would you do? And I'd go to the bathroom or I'd smile at somebody or if you, and it's that if you had magical powers and there were no consequences. So it's around getting people, which is similar to what you're doing, is getting the person to visualize what it is they want. And from that, because if you can visualize and then you focus on the feelings associated
Exactly.
in that situation, then somehow there is magic there. Whether you're praying for it, whether you've been in psychotherapy or whether you're a chaos magician, to be able to manifest it. Now, Poppy says it sounds like proper magic. I still don't understand the difference to chaos magic. And I think it's about, I think people are, and this would have been my thing, is like when I first came across the term chaos magic, oh, it's these people with wands creating hurricanes and, social destruction or something. And the way you talk about chaos magic, it's is this semantics? So
Chaos magic is not about chaos. Definitely not. Yeah, it's Crowley also changed the writing of magic into magic with CK. Everybody knows this, to make a distinct between, let's say, stage magic and proper magic. Because, your own, let's say, internal belief system might not believe that magic is true. Let's say this magic with a C. If you change the name into something like chaos magic, then suddenly your subconscious gets, let's say, more open to create possibilities. And out of chaos, order can actually come. Because that's actually what you do. You have all the possibilities you have, and that is this chaos, and you simply create out of this chaos what you would like to create. That's how I see chaos magic actually.
okay, because
And it's not about creating chaos. It's absolutely not. It's simply manifesting whatever you like, whatever you want. And I told you, of course, people hardly know what they want to do. So I also teach them how to find what they really want, because I also believe, but that could also be a limitation of myself, that you can only manifest the things that really belong to you. There are things. I could wish for lots of things, but if it doesn't belong to what I need to do on this earth, or this planet, I can't manifest it. So you can only manifest things that really are you. And that's also, let's say, the tricky part, because, finding out what you wish, you have to actually clear your mind. You have to clear, let's say, the neocortex. You have to stop thinking, you have to blank your mind, and you have to, let's say, get down into your subconscious, because there is actually all the information you need about what you would be able to create. And here in Germany, we have this fantastic writer, Goethe. Everybody heard of him, of course. He had a really nice sentence about wishes, and he said, I'm not sure if we're going to able to get that right in English, but he said, wishes are a feeling of the things that can be manifested.
okay,
So it's really deep inside yourself. But in order to find out what you really want, you have the most important part to do in all this, and you can give it different names, but you could call it, you have to relax, you have to clear your mind, and you have to, let's say, dream away a bit. And in this dreaming away, you could get the option to see the future that you desire. And in magical terms, you could also say you have to go into a trance.
okay.
Yeah, but in business terms, you say, no, you simply have to relax, you have to meditate a bit, and with that, you have to create the things you really wish for. Yeah. Yeah, because you have lots of things about how to manifest stuff. You also have the stuff that's called the secret. Everybody probably also has heard about that. And that's, let's say, an American way of manifesting stuff. If you want a boat, you simply visualize a boat and you get a boat. I really don't believe in those things because, and with willpower, you can, of course, achieve a lot. But, the best magic happens when it actually suits the purpose, your purpose, why you're here. But it's really a conscious process you have to do. You have to find out what would I like to manifest. You have to see it, you have to feel it, you have to believe that it can be true, and you have to share it with people. Because the interesting thing is, and you could call it a spell. If you share it with people, things happen. But when I teach this to people, I always come with a little example. I work with groups quite a lot, and then I tell them about a certain type of car I want. Because my wish is I would like to have a Renault 4. Do you know these cars?
I do. They're still around.
Yeah. No, they're not. They're not. So you can only get them second hand. But I love a Renault 4. So that's my wish. I would like to have that car. And it has to be a red one because red is a color I really like. So I know what I want. I visualize it. I see myself driving in it. I have this small basket in the back with some wine and bread and cheese, of course. A bit of a romantic idea. See myself driving. I believe that I can find a car like that. I also believe I can afford it. And that I say in this group, so you all know now what my wish is. And then I say, and I know one thing for sure, if you see a Renault 4 for sale tomorrow, you will think of me. And if I'm lucky, you're going to call me. And that's what sharing your wishes do, People like to help people. They really do. But they have to know how. And if you can make it really clear, magic happens. Absolutely. People start to do that. And I can tell you, I have had already lots of offers for Renault 4s. I get sent postcards with Renault 4s. So it really works. I could have filled up a complete parking place already for with this type of car.
Did you buy it?
No, not yet. No, I can't buy it because otherwise people have nothing to do. They simply should offer it to me. But it will happen. It will happen. I do have a small red car, by the way. That's it's a step in the right direction. But this is how magic works because a magical spell is actually saying what you desire. Yeah. And then the universe starts to help you. That's what it does. And the universe has, let's say, interesting ways of helping you. It might not be the right way. At least not the way you think it is. If you look at, let's say, what are let's say factors, habits that successful people have in common, there are always two things. They have a strong focus, and the focus is the magical part. What do I want? Can I really see it? Believe it? Do I believe it? That's the focus part. But they are also open to what the universe presents to them. And if you're open to what the universe presents to you, then you get something like synchronicity.
Absolutely.
And synchronicity is important, if you want to manifest stuff. Because I'll suppose someone calls me, I saw this Renault 4, but it's a green one. And I would say, well, no, I definitely don't want a green one. It might even be better than the red one. So I really should be open to what the universe offers me. And have a look at that green one. It might be really good. Yeah. And I can tell you about this house in the forest. It was an important step. But I lived in the forest, let's say, for a year approximately in the Netherlands. And then I found out it's no fun to live in the forest like that. Because in the winter it's cold, it's dark, it's wet. And but it brought me only a few months later to a house at the edge of the forest on a sunny spot. And I would have never gotten there if I was not first in the forest itself. So there might be some side ways in order to get what you want, but I think the universe also helps you, to get to the place that actually belongs to you, that works for you. Yeah.
There's a comment here from a fellow Netherlands Druid. I don't know if you say Jacqueline or Jacqueline. I don't know, Van der Velde. She says, and this is interesting, first you need to know who you really are. Then you can think about what you really want. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yes. The system in itself is a bit, let's say, it's more elaborate than I just told. You have to know who you are, because basically, you have to work on a few ingredients first. I would say if you know what, let's say, your core talent is, then you have a basic idea about who you are. What is it that you do naturally by yourself? What comes easily with you? Most people lost that, by the way, in the course of their lives. They have to find that back because they started to adapt to other people, to the school system, to a culture, whatever. Finding yourself in that part is really important. Next to that, you have to find out what blocks you actually, because you have many limiting thoughts, and you also have to get an idea on what would keep you back from what you really could achieve. So finding yourself, getting to know yourself is really an important ingredient. But that's, for me, it's a lifetime job. Yeah.
Just Nordic Rainbow has a question, and you may have answered it, or you may need to elaborate on it. How do you stop someone who's trying to stop you from manifesting what is yours?
A really good question, absolutely. Because, when you start to share what you actually want to manifest, there are basically two types of reactions. People that say, well, that's really great, and people that say, well, that's absolutely not great. And those people are never going to help you. They're not. So then you should make a choice. I would say focus on the people that actually share what you would like to manifest, because when you believe in something, that's one person believing. But when more people start believing what you would like to manifest, it gets more powerful. And then the chances of things coming through are even bigger. Yeah.
Again, Jacqueline says, I find this also materialistic. Which would be very like The Secret thing, you want a red for Ferrari, you get one or whatever. And that's more ambitious than a Renault 4 in my book. But anyway. But
yeah, well, you could use it for lots of purposes, that's for sure. It's just an example for that car and other stuff and that house. But sometimes, you simply have to have a place that actually supports you. So you have to live somewhere that actually supports the person you really are. For me, that really helps in that sense. Yeah, but in order to find out what you truly want, you first have to work on yourself. And my experience is that the more you know about yourself, the less you want.
yeah,
Yeah,
the more you discover that you have.
exactly.
Gabriella says, what I understand of these explanations is chaos magic is a way to tap into your potential or your future. And not necessarily linked to achieving or materials, but more like aligning to paths that match you.
Yeah, well, and chaos magic is really interesting in that sense. The interesting thing about all things magic is that there is not, it doesn't work like, let's say in the scientific world. So that it's more that people actually find their own way of working on things, of manifesting things. So chaos magic is really a broad spectrum of practices that work for you. It's almost like Druidry. You find out a methodology or a practice that definitely supports you. And what you can do is, of course, read about it, find out what other people do in this area, But pick out the things that you like, pick out the things that work for you, because it has to support your belief system. And then that's the main thing.
Absolutely. And I think, Carol, maybe speak a little bit to this. Knowing who you are and what your purpose in life, then find the silent place to do your work. For me, it is more to manifest more for others than myself. I trust that the universe will provide what I need without my seeking for myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It
Yeah, I
is.
agree to that absolutely, because I also found out that um, there's no need to ask to wish for money, for instance, because you don't need money to manifest the things that are important to you. And that's not only my observation, but also from a lot of other people working in the same area. You only have to be clear about what you need. Yeah,
Yes, and something, Rosemary, it's interesting the synchronicity of, what you're saying, and then the comments that appear in the chat. Rosemary says, to manifest, it is best to get to the heart of what you want. For example, a
yeah,
car gives you a sense of freedom. Just ask for freedom. If you want a lot of money, perhaps the heart of it is security and connection or joy. And I think you're saying that it's not actually the money or the car or the big house, but there's that safe place in which to live, or a means to be able to get to work. But there is that
exactly.
sense, um,
Yeah,
getting to the
yeah,
core of things.
exactly. That's also what I tell in my workshops. If you think it's about money, you're wrong, because it's never about money. Money is usually about wanting to make your own decisions, feeling free, being independent. These things are the things that are really valuable. And the interesting things, the things that are really valuable are the things that you can't touch. So they are definitely not materialistic. Absolutely not. But for instance, a car can give you a sense of freedom because you can travel without trouble. So it's always important, to find the real wish, the wish below what you really would like on let's say on the surface. And that's why you really have to meditate about what it is that you actually would like to achieve, what you like to get. Yeah. And it's for me it's never about money or
Mm-hmm.
other stuff. Yeah.
Vincent says, this is an interesting. I'm curious about magic when it comes to the disabled, cancer, death. So many people wish for the person to get well, but it never seems to happen. Is it because it is different? Are there limitations?
Well, I'm a fan of the work of Joe Dispenza. And it's a complicated business. I'm not a specialist on that area, definitely not. Um, but the human being is a really interesting phenomenon. We still hardly understand ourselves. We still hardly don't know how our brain functions, for
Mm-hmm.
instance. We only know a few small percentage. But Joe Dispenza wrote a really interesting booklet that's called "You Are the Placebo," and he says, I think it's in that book that he writes that the human body is capable of making 1,300 different chemicals, and that's a lot. And with all those chemicals, you could be able to generate your own medicine if you believe in it. And I'm sure, it's a controversial topic and it's difficult. And if you're ill, it's really horrible. And there could be all kinds of reasons why that's happening. Um, but you could always try to experiment a bit with it. You never know. It might work out. It might help. Yeah, and then there are really some amazing stories. Stories that also, by the way, Joe Dispenza tells himself. And I was trained by him some time ago. Because he started with researching that. Um, I think he was. I'm not sure what his actual profession was, but he was, let's say, into neurological stuff. He's well known from What the Bleep Do We Know? That's one of the films he featured in, and since then actually got more and more. involved in actually also the manifesting stuff, how you actually do that. And he did some research about people that actually were terminally ill. And what surprised him so much is that a number of them did not die. And what he found out by researching their brain, that their brain structure completely changed in a short amount of time. And his conclusion was, when they finally heard that they were terminally ill, they thought, okay, then I'm now going to live my life as I would like to live it. And that actually meant that they created a new energetical and new chemical balance in their life. And that is at least an explanation he uses of this stuff. And I would say it makes sense, because in my workshop I also tell a lot about how the brain works, for what we know. That basically, all people think almost every day the same thoughts. 95% of what people think is every day the same, basically. And if your thoughts are every day almost the same, then your words are probably also the same. And the things you do are probably also the same. And when the things you do are the same, you have patterns. And when you have patterns, you create character, and with character, you create destiny. So, changing the way you think really helps a lot, basically. And that's also what the bardic process is, seeing things from a different perspective. Yeah.
True. It's interesting, that thing about death, because there's, when you ask, is death a limitation? But, and death is part of life. We do have to die. And it would be nice if we could live for as long as we like, but not everybody does. And it's interesting, when Howard, my husband, got his diagnosis of cancer 8 years ago. I mean, he died 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago. But his was, I'm going to live fully for as long as I can. And he was still writing. He published 2 books in his last 6 weeks. So he lived very, very fully until the time came, and he was living fully. He was, the morning he died, he was editing an article on rock carvings in Scotland. So he even though physically he had pancreatic cancer, for which the outcome is not very good. However, he lived really, really well, and he always said that he'd and he and I, that we packed 2 lives into one. And I'm sad that he's gone, but it's like that. It was his time. Sometimes we have to be careful. I'm not talking about you. That this notion that someone who dies or has cancer and then they die, it was their negative thinking or their belief system, etc. And then you get this kind of new age guilt that, I mean, I often hear it, well, the reason I don't have cancer is because of the way I'm living my life. And it's like, well, actually.
No, I also don't believe in that, because there are so many conditions that actually might cause something. It's far too simple to say that it's your way of thinking. I don't believe it. It might have an influence. That's what I believe, because I think it has an influence on everything you do. And if you think positive, at least you have a nicer life. Because, one thing is for sure, your life can never be better than the best thoughts you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's a purpose to these things. I think, who is it? Gabriella says, one of my aunts has been tremendously ill and bedridden for most of her life. There was no cure for her issues, yet she didn't die. Now, this is really interesting. Her illness brought her close family together and made them grateful. And I know when I used to work with women who had recovered from breast cancer, and I remember asking, having in group work, what their cancer had brought them. And the women, most of them said it was a gift. It was a wake-up call, that it got them to change how they were living.
Yeah.
Or learning gratitude. It's a bit like, Gabriella's family, bringing them closer together, that you have some illness or some ability or disability, and that there's a purpose to it, a higher purpose to it. I think is an important one. Nordic says, Rainbow says, I heard visualization of healing has been applied to cancer patient treatments. Absolutely. People do that. And then somebody says, perhaps it cannot cure the illness, but perhaps it can cure the soul. And I think that's a very, very important one too. That if we believe in another world or in an afterlife, that we're stuck in this body, but that we have a higher purpose that goes beyond that, and that maybe this healing of the soul is very, very important.
Definitely. And then, so far I never met anybody who actually know the answers on all this stuff. So, so we have to find out for ourselves, I think, and it might be different for everybody. Yeah. So, as long as we don't get, let's say, the full story for our lives on how it works, we still have to discover the stuff. And that's also the nice part of life, that you simply can experiment, find out what works, what doesn't work. And you might make a wrong turn, but well, then you're smart. Actually, you'll find other ways to help yourself.
That's right. Rosemary says, sometimes the universal mind has a greater purpose, and our limited past experience worldview may not allow for new possibilities. Surrender and trust in the deepest way can allow for new connection and expansion. I couldn't agree with you more. I think sometimes surrender and trusting in the deepest way can be very, very challenging. And I think I've always been able to do that. And with this COVID pandemic, I've been challenged by that.
Mm-hmm.
The way we are in the world now has challenged my trust. But it's absolutely. So cognitively, I know that. And right now I'm kind of going, yes, I'm still trying to restore my trust. But I think that's a very, very important point that you make, Rosemary.
Absolutely.
And then Gabriella says, it's really interesting comments here. Perhaps there are souls who come here to experience life in those bodies and thus affect their families in certain ways to bring more love. Absolutely. That somehow not being in being in a so-called imperfect body with not perfect abilities, whatever they mean, is not a sign of a failure or a
No,
sign
it's
of
not.
some punishment or payback for what you've done in a previous life. That can really, really have a very pure purpose. And of course, we don't know that.
Exactly, and I also think that way of thinking, so suppose you have a handicap or an illness that for me it would never be about something you did wrong. I think I think Christianity actually put that thought more or less in our culture.
Which one? Sorry.
Christianity actually might have put that type of thinking in our culture.
Like the punishment bit.
Yeah, exactly. If you're ill, you must have, well, at least in the past, it was definitely the case, but within the Christian belief system, that then you probably did do something wrong. And I think also we have to liberate ourselves from that way of thinking. Now, I think also life is about accepting what happens to you. And if you can't accept it, you could try to change it. And if you can't change it, you simply have to accept it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Gabriella, just one thing. One of my childhood friends was slower. He didn't go over the age of 7, yet now he's a grown man, very much integrated in the community, very loved, and he really affected all of our lives growing up. And that is a gift. It's an interesting one. The old phrase in Ireland, in Irish, was for somebody like your friend Gabriella, was Dina Legia, which meant a person with God, that somehow they had a special blessing from God and were cherished, which I think is a very, very nice way of accepting people and really, really appreciating the gift that they bring to a family or a community.
Exactly, yeah, and actually I love that, um, because well, I know people that are dyslexic, and I always think, it's not a disability; it's a different way of looking at the world, a different way of seeing things. So it's also, you could also see it as a gift, and actually, all these different and all these different kinds of people make the world to, let's say, an amazing place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll just see. Francis Joy, the great name. At this time of year, we're presented with the grief of the ancestors from the wars and conflicts that have been fought. Addictions and a multitude of illnesses and health conditions come from what can be complex or original grief inherited from the ancestors. From experience, this is a work for most people. I suppose, and we were on just a few weeks back with you in Germany, holding a workshop on ancestors of the past, the present, and the future. And part of that was healing some ancestor in our line, which I think was very, very profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Great workshop. Yeah.
Vincent, this is it's lovely to hear that. I feel it's important to have ableism in any faith. Egbert is right. I got told my daughter was disabled because of my lack of faith by my church many years ago. That hurt a lot. That is some burden to have to be landed with. That is appalling. Sorry to hear
Yeah,
that.
that's horrible. Yeah. We have in the Netherlands a Dutch writer. He wrote a book, The Kabbalist, Geert Kimper. It's really a lovely book. Of course, it depends on your worldview if you like things like that, but I liked it a lot actually. And what he actually describes is that you actually live your life to get certain experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And being disabled can also be an experience that your soul would like to have in order to, let's say, become more mature. And in his book, The Kabbalist, actually, it's so interesting because he also writes the moment where people die. And when they die, they usually finish the experience that they would like to have in their life. So then the life is actually finished. I had this experience, I had this lesson. So up to, let's say, the next level. Yeah.
That's wonderful. I remember my husband had an aunt, Pete, and she died at 89. But when she was 70, her husband kicked her out. And she had to find another place to live. And then when she was 75, she was run over by a bus, survived, and so she had to get a above-knee amputation. So then she had to learn how to manage, with a prosthetic leg, and she took up swimming. And she said her disability opened doors for her. It freed her. She said it was one of the most freeing things. And this was, at 75. And
that's perfect because, it also shows that she has an open mind, not feeling sorry for what happened, but actually opening up for possibilities, because life gives you so much if you can simply see it. And of course, could also be, let's say, in a victim role, and then you would have a horrible life, I think. But if you see what the universe offers you, what it brings you also, and under all these kind of different conditions, yeah, it's about being grateful, actually.
Yeah, and it taught her to stand up for herself. So she did. She became stroppy and mouthy, and it's just really interesting. That you think if part of you is gone, and it's like, oh no, this has freed me up to just to go on and take no nonsense. So it's
wonderful.
Really do that. So we mentioned ancestors. How do you see yourself? How do you take your responsibility as an ancestor? You as a future ancestor.
Well, first of all, reincarnation is for me a real thing. So I will get back, that's for sure. And I would like to come back in a nice place.
Okay.
So I'll try to do anything in order to keep that place tidy. And of course, that's also a difficult thing, because you never know what actually is good to do or what's bad to do. We have an idea about that, but you never know how it actually works out in general. So I would say I have kids. I even have grandchildren. So I actually really would like to have to not to actually to leave a better world for them. So I do all the things that, let's say, most Druids also do, trying to be as sustainable as possible in everything I undertake. That's one thing. Um, yeah, and being open for whatever happens actually, and how I can change things. I also did work quite a lot, let's say, in the environmental area. I worked in and created actually an environmental organization in the
Uh-huh.
past, where I worked for 7 years. Um, so yeah, basically, trying to do the things I think that are important. And these are just my ideas, of course, on how that should be. And then other people probably have different ideas. But if I look in the OBOD community in general, I think, well, we are contributing a lot as an organization, just by the way we actually live as druids. Yeah, I try to be as vegetarian as possible. Um, buy healthy food, help people, work on the land, save the forest, well, thousands of things like most people do, and I think that helps a lot. But I also think, that we could do more, let's say, with big corporations,
Mm-hmm.
um, and specifically, let's say, with the leaders in big corporations. And one of the things I recently created it's kind of a high level workshop, training that lasts a year for people in that on that level. And what I hope to achieve with that is that they also start to look differently at the world and at their position and role. So, and that they also would like try to contribute to creating a better place, a better world.
Okay. Just another question. Does Egbert believe that the more good you do, the better you reincarnate?
Well, the good and the bad stuff is really an interesting question, and of course I worked on that. I think it was also part of the true grade, but at least I did work on it. What's good and what's bad. Basically, these are things that humans have an idea about, um, and I have no clue actually. I have some memories about past lives, really vivid memories actually, and I'm also kind of certain that I was never, not always, let's say, a really good person. So there's also a dark side there. And still, I'm living a life that I'm kind of happy with. So probably I also did something good in that sense. But the talk about what's good and what's bad is really almost impossible to answer, I would say, at least for me.
I think so, because I think if we've come here with a purpose, and I remember when I was first presented with the notion that I had chosen my parents
Hmm.
and a family in which I found that really challenging. I thought, there's no way I would have done that. That is ludicrous, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And I think I would say I have a very good life. I I haven't always been happy. I've had
Hmm.
a lot of pain, a lot of challenges. But when I look at my life now, it's a good life.
Hmm.
Although it's not an easy life, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
And that, when I get something comes my way that's very challenging, I don't see that as a punishment, as, oh, I must have done something bad in a previous life. But it's like, okay, I've this has been sent to me because I have to learn, and it's not based on how well I was in how good I was in the previous life.
Hmm.
Which actually, I find out, whether I'm making this up or not. Well, I am making it up. We all make up our own belief system,
Hmm.
whether it's true or not. But it helps me to make sense of it, rather than being victimized or being a victim of circumstance, or that I'm feeling bad about myself, and
Hmm.
that that kind of notion undermines me.
Hmm.
So it's like, because it's easy to blame, well, you brought this on yourself, when in fact, actually, no, I was brought to this point, like I've made wrong decisions in this life, for example. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
now I've made a big mistake. What can I learn from it? And it's that learning. And of course, we learn most from our mistakes, not from the things we've done right. And I find that really empowering. And it's also a compassionate way of looking at ourselves, is that we do what we do. And the important thing is to be able to learn from it and reflect on it.
Yeah, yeah. One of these values that I mentioned, is stop judging about yourself and about others. But then you automatically get to the things, okay, and then what's good and what's bad. Because people always judge. Even I do judge about things. But for me, the good thing is to know that I'm consciously judging, because then I won't take it so seriously. And sometimes judging is also fun, but for me, it's always about not taking it seriously when I do it. I could and probably will be wrong, so that's why judging does not help so much. But then for myself, I found out, what's then good behavior and bad behavior, and I actually made this line: if I can share it with other people, it's probably good. If I don't like to share it with other people, I should have to look at it again. So that's for me, let's say, how I find out if I'm doing the good things or not.
And there's also, if you look at social norms and then you're breaking with those social norms, that might be the right thing to do, but
Hmm.
that your judge is doing something wrong. Uh,
Yeah.
so how do we sometimes know? I mean, maybe we have, like, it's not good to kill people, but then in a war, people get killed because we defend. So it's all very, very complex. So
It's
what's,
definitely complex, and, and
you know,
and that's why you can't judge about. Of course, we know, as humans, we know what we think is bad. No discussion about that. But you will never know what the effects are. One of the interesting things that happened, let's say, in the time that Trump was president, he was absolutely not into environmental stuff.
yeah.
And then the nice thing is actually that because he was not into environmental stuff, more and more businesses in the United States actually said, but we find it important and we're going to invest in being more sustainable. So sometimes bad behavior creates good things.
Yeah. Fran says, still trying to appreciate learning opportunities at 72. Sometimes I say it's a bit late. It's never too late, Fran. You could be here for another 30 years. So just think about it. And it's never too late. So I think that's very, very important. Gabriella, all souls are divine. So at the end of the day, they have their own choices and their own wills. Yeah. And we chose experience and what we want to learn, and we are exposed to that repeatedly until learning. Some people choose hardcore lessons, others fluffy ones. Maybe, yeah.
Well, it actually triggers something else, because I also believe that you can live in the reality you would like to live in. You simply can create your own reality, and that's, let's say, the advanced form of wishing, of manifesting, that you create a reality that you're completely happy with. And I think that's possible. You can simply do that. And you see that happening with lots of people, because basically everyone has his own worldview and his own reality inside him. You can change that if you want. And I also think there's not such a thing as a good or a bad reality. It's simply a choice. How would you like to live your life? And if you know how you would like to live it, simply go for it. Experience it.
There's a question from JJ here. Hello, old
Hey,
friend.
JJ.
This is a very tough question now he's asking. What makes you happiest?
What makes me happiest?
Yeah.
That's indeed a tough question, JJ. Almost impossible to answer, but yeah, for me, it's sharing sharing my life with my beloved. That's what makes me happiest. No doubt about that. And of course, there are also lots of other things that make me happy. Simply seeing happy people, seeing that my kids are living a happy life. So there are thousands of things actually. Yeah.
And that comes, I mean, that's very simple. And that comes down to relationship, people who are important to you. And it's about
Yeah.
love and
Yeah.
respect and honor. I think that's very, very, and that's the simplest things. It's not the red Renault 4 or the big house,
Now,
whatever it is.
and actually, people value those things the most because you can't buy love, you can't buy trust. All these things are actually more or less untouchable, but we value them the most. And if you think about true wishes, then they actually are in that area.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to come back to decisions and mistakes, Poppy says, I see it as colors. If you paint white on white, you won't see it. If you paint white on black, you will see how beautiful the white is. That's how I choose to look at my past. And then in parentheses, bad decisions. And then Vincent, Nelson Mandela spent over 27 years in prison standing up for what was right. Sometimes to manifest the reality we want takes a lot of sacrifice. Would you agree?
Oh, definitely, because I really believe that you know every wish has its price. It's like that. Um, yeah, and it's also about are you willing to pay the price? Um, you know, when I actually do my workshops, I ask people to make a list of wishes, and I ask them to divide that into several categories. Yeah, like what do you find important with your work? What do you find important financially? What do you find important in your relation, emotionally, physically? So let's say a number of areas. Um, and it turns out if they write that down and really think about it, then they also see where it doesn't match anymore. Because they sometimes say, I would like to make a lot of money. And then you see, I would also like to spend a lot of time with my kids and my family. And then you have to make choices. Can you do both? Well, I don't think you can do both in the proper way. So you have to make choices. Um, yeah. And that really helps, to focus on the things that are really important to you. And that's why you have to pay a price. If you don't want to work so much, that's great, but then you also should not spend so much, I would say. So yeah, there's always a price to pay. Sometimes big, sometimes small, but that fits in. If you make a wish, be careful what you wish for.
And Jacqueline says, it's wonderful, but these are all side of yourself. She said, I have no relationships, no kids. I try to find the happiness within myself. Any comment on that?
Yeah, well, and I think you can only take care of other people if you take care of yourself. So it always starts with taking care of yourself, being there, and if you are happy, um, you actually radiate that, and actually can take more care of other people. So it always starts. I also think you can't do proper magic if you don't take care of yourself. You simply have to know if you're not in a good state. The first things you start work on is how do I come more easy with myself? How do I relax more? How can I take more care of the things that are important to me? It's really an important subject, and I also think that most people don't take care enough of themselves. They're usually more focused on other people instead of themselves. It's like in the airplane, they always say first put the mask on yourself, then to your kid.
That's right.
And that's also with living. If you are doing well, you can do well to other people.
Absolutely. Inara says, some of the bad things that happened to me have brought me to the life that I have now. If these things hadn't happened, I would not have this life, this family, and this work. So I'm grateful for these hard times. Sometimes I wonder where I would be without these experiences, but I would not change the past if I could. I think that's a lovely place to arrive at. It's a bit like that song, Frank Sinatra's "I Did It My Way." Times are tough,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
that it brings you, it makes you who you are, and to be able to see the beauty in that and to find gratitude in
absolutely.
it, it's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course if you live your life properly, you make mistakes, and you do horrible things and make wrong decisions. We've all been there, actually. Yeah,
Yeah, Benoit says, yes, bad decisions often make better teachings. Yeah. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, no
you've
pain,
all,
no gain.
that's
So
right. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So we're coming to the end of our chat. And I always ask my last question, well, it's two parts to it. What is your favorite season? And what is your favorite festival when the Wheel of the Year?
Okay. Yeah. Uh, well, my favorite festival is actually Almanachta. Yeah.
Okay. And what makes it your favorite one?
It was the first festival I did with a group of pagans, but not druids. And actually, they asked me to do a fire ceremony, and I love to do that. It was for 30 people, and since then I have a special connection to Alban Artem. Yeah. So for me, that's what I really love. Of course, all the other festivals too. My favorite season, yeah, I don't have a favorite season. I always like all the seasons. Of course, um, at the end of winter, I really like spring. That's for sure. But it's kind of natural, I think. At the end of a certain season, you long for the next season, and sometimes in summer when it's really hot, I can long for winter and snow. Yeah. But yeah, and then if it's too much snow and too long cold, then of course it's summer again. So uh, all of the season have their own blessings, I would say.
Gabriella, you said I was too fast. Okay, Gabriella likes to bet what my guest is going to say. And you missed it. It's Alban Arthur is his favorite festival, and I think you got. Um, she likes to place bets on what my guest is saying. So I don't know what you would have said. Anyway, he said Alban Arthur, and that
Yeah,
the
that's good.
spring is after that hope.
Mhm.
What's the weather like where you are now? I mean, in Germany.
Um, it was really a nice day, blue sky actually. This morning was kind of cold, -2 degrees, so the
Oh,
fields were covered with some
frost.
frost. And we actually really approaching winter. It gets colder, let's say, every day. Yeah, and
Oh,
usually here in this part of Germany, we do have snow, and we are able to ski a bit in this area. So that's almost good. Yeah.
well, we haven't had, well, not where I am anyway, no frost yet. It was about 12 degrees today, which is still quite warm for this time. And
Yeah.
it's only, I'm noticing this week that our leaves, or maybe the last 2 weeks,
Mhm.
actually not for Samhain, the leaves are still green at Samhain time.
Mhm.
So this last week, like looking now at yellow leaves on the trees rather than green. So,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We still have some leaves on the trees, and that's kind of special for this time of year. Usually they're gone. So still loving that to see all these different colors. Yeah, but actually, it feels definitely like winter is close. Yeah.
yes. What is the J.R.R. Martin? Winter is coming.
Winter is coming,
Indeed.
definitely. But also summer and
Game of
summer
Thrones.
again. So it keeps our hopes up. Yeah.
Indeed. Listen, lovely having you as a guest, Egbert. I think people really enjoyed the conversation, and thank you so much. So you've
Well,
been a
thank
great
you
guest.
for having me.
And then Vincent says, thank you for answering so many of our questions and sharing your insights tonight. And thank you, Ian, for a lovely evening. So many blessings. Thank you. Um, So I'm going to, you don't go, but I'm just going to turn you off and I'll just say goodbye to
Yeah.
everybody here. So,
All right. Bye bye.
Jon Snow, that's right. So listen, thank you so much for being here this evening and for your comments. I know we didn't get to look at all of them because sometimes they come really, really fast. But it was lovely to have your interaction. And I look forward to seeing you next week for another Fireside Chat. In the meantime, I see some questions. How are people adjusting to daylight savings times and all of that? Be well and nurture yourself. And I suppose to be able to go with the flow into the dark time of the year, knowing and trusting that the sun will be reborn at the solstice and then the evenings will get brighter and brighter. And hopefully 22 will bring us more joy and more hope and more magic. Anyway, have a good evening, a good morning, good afternoon. Till I see you next week. Slán go fóill.